The rain had been falling since morning, turning the dirt roads of São Lázaro into rivers of brown. I stood under the crooked bell tower, watching the drops crawl down the rusted cross. The air smelled of iron and wet stone, the kind of smell that seeps into your bones and stays there. That was when I saw him, Father Alvarez, standing in the doorway of the rectory, his black cloak clinging to his shoulders. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just waited, as if he knew I'd come the moment the bells began to toll. "João Ribeiro," he said when I stepped closer, "the church needs your hands tonight." My hands. That's what they always wanted. Never my heart, never my thoughts, just my hands. I was the gravedigger, the man who cleaned what death left behind. And though I'd buried enough bodies to fill the cemetery twice over, the way he said it that night made my stomach turn. Inside the rectory, the candles burned low, making the wooden walls look like they were sweating wax. The wind kept moaning through the cracks, carrying the faint echo of thunder. Alvarez sat behind his desk, his fingers clasped over a small crucifix. His eyes were sunken and restless, as though he hadn't slept in days. "There's a matter of urgency," he said. "A priest has fallen, one of our own. Father Tomás." I'd heard the name before. Everyone in São Lázaro had. Tomás was the one who came from Lisbon last winter to help rebuild the old chapel on the hill. The one who gave food to the beggars when the church refused. The one who stopped preaching one day and started screaming at the altar the next. "They say he's sick," I said quietly. Alvarez's lips tightened. "Not sick. Possessed." The word hung in the air like smoke. I shifted my weight, unsure if I'd heard right. Possession was a word people used when cows went mad or children talked to shadows. But a priest? "Then he needs an exorcism," I said. Alvarez leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw the faint tremor in his hands. "This is beyond exorcism. The demon refuses to leave his flesh. He recites verses backwards, spits at the sacraments. I have prayed over him for 3 nights, and still he mocks God's name." His eyes flicked toward the window, where the rain streaked down the glass like tears. "The Vatican has sent its command," he whispered. "The spirit must be sealed. The body must be buried alive." I thought I'd misheard him. My heart stuttered, a slow, hard thud against my ribs. "Buried alive?" I repeated. He nodded once. "It's an old rite. The body becomes the vessel. The earth becomes the tomb. The evil cannot pass through the soil." I laughed, though there was nothing funny about it. "That's not a rite. That's murder." Alvarez's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do not question the church, João. You are a servant, not a judge." He opened a drawer and slid a small piece of paper toward me. It bore a single line written in red ink. "Before dawn, he must be buried in sanctified ground." For a long time, I just stared at the words. My throat was dry, my hands trembling. Every instinct told me to walk away, to leave this cursed village behind. But then I saw the silver rosary on Alvarez's wrist, the same kind my wife used to wear before she died. She had died giving birth, and I'd buried her myself. The church had said it was God's will. I'd believed them once. Maybe I still did, somewhere deep inside, where grief hides behind faith. So I nodded. "Tell me where to dig." Alvarez's eyes softened, relief or pity, I couldn't tell. "The old cemetery, near the elm tree." "Dig deep." "And João." He paused, his voice lowering into something almost human. "Don't look at him, no matter what he says, no matter how he pleads." Outside, the thunder rolled again. I left the rectory with the paper clutched in my hand, and the rain striking my face like cold needles. The path to the cemetery wound through the forest, where the fog hung low, and the trees seemed to bend inward, whispering. I could hear the distant howling of dogs, or maybe wolves. The lantern I carried flickered, the light trembling with every gust. When I reached the gates, the iron hinges creaked like old bones. Rows of crooked crosses stretched into the darkness, each one leaning, as if the earth were trying to swallow it. The air was heavy, thicker than it should have been. I found the elm tree easily. Its branches twisted like fingers clawing at the sky. I placed my shovel into the soil and began to dig. The ground was stubborn, wet, and cold. Each strike echoed in the silence, a hollow sound that made me flinch. My arms ached, but I kept going. As the hole deepened, I started hearing something faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. It came and went, soft and strange. I stopped digging, listening. At first, I thought it was the rain. Then I realized it wasn't. It was a voice. A man's voice. Praying. And though I didn't understand every word, I knew the language. Latin. The voice came from somewhere in the darkness beyond the graves, steady, low, and broken by gasps. I turned, lantern raised high. The fog thickened, swallowing the light. Then in the distance I saw it, the faint glow of another lantern. It was moving slowly toward me. I stood there, shovel in hand, as Father Alvarez emerged from the mist, his black cloak soaked, his eyes sharp and unreadable. Behind him, 2 men followed, dragging something heavy on a wooden stretcher. When they came close, I saw what it was. A coffin. And inside it, bound in chains, was a man still breathing. That was the moment I realized I had truly stepped into sin. And that night, under the dying rain, I began to dig the grave that would change everything. The rain started before nightfall, steady and cold, soaking through my coat long before I reached the cemetery gates. São Lázaro always looked strange in the rain. The cobblestone paths reflected the lantern light like wet mirrors, and the statues of saints seemed to weep under the downpour. The air smelled of rust, soil, and incense, the scent that never truly left this town. I carried my shovel on my shoulder, the metal slick with rain. The wind howled through the crooked trees as if warning me to turn back. But I didn't. Father Alvarez's words echoed in my head. By dawn, the soil must consume him. His voice carried the weight of confession, like something sacred and secret all at once. The cemetery lay at the edge of the forest, behind the old chapel that no one prayed in anymore. The gate creaked open under my hand, its hinges shrieking like a dying thing. My boots sank into the mud, and each step felt heavier than the last. I knew the spot where he wanted the grave, an old section where no one visited, where even the flowers refused to grow. I planted the shovel into the ground. The soil was thick and wet, clinging to the metal like blood. Each thrust made a dull, wet sound, and the earth seemed to resist me. As I dug deeper, the rain grew harder, pounding the wooden crosses around me. For a while, there was only the sound of my breathing and the shovel cutting into the ground. But then I heard something else. Faint, like the wind whispering through the trees. Words. Latin words. Familiar prayers. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. I stopped, listening. The whispers faded. Then they came again, clearer this time. Libera nos malo. Deliver us from evil. I gripped the shovel tighter. My hands trembled. The sound wasn't coming from the forest. It was coming from the ground. I forced myself to keep digging. The shovel struck something hard, a root, maybe. But when I leaned down, I saw it wasn't a root at all. It was bone. Old, yellowed bone peeking from the mud. The graveyard had always been overcrowded. Graves built upon graves. It wasn't unusual, I told myself. Not unusual at all. I said a prayer under my breath, though I wasn't sure who I was praying to anymore. My voice cracked when I said her name, my wife's name. Sometimes I still talked to her when I worked. It made the silence easier to bear. But tonight, even her memory felt distant, like a candle flickering in a storm. A flash of lightning lit the entire cemetery, followed by a roar of thunder that shook the ground. In that moment of light, I saw something, just for a heartbeat. A shadow standing among the gravestones, too tall, too still. Watching me. When the darkness returned, it was gone. I swallowed hard and dug faster. Mud splashed my face. My arms ached. The hole grew deeper, black and endless beneath me. The rainwater began to pool at the bottom, mixing with the dirt. I couldn't tell where the earth ended and the water began. Then came the bells. From somewhere deep in town, the church bells began to toll. Slow, heavy, mournful. But they weren't supposed to ring at this hour. Not unless someone had died. I counted them, 1, 2, 3, 12 times. Midnight. The 12th bell echoed through the valley, and with it, the whispers returned. Closer. Louder. This time, I could hear a voice hidden within them, a man's voice. Soft, trembling, almost pleading. Help me. The words froze me in place. The shovel slipped from my hands and fell into the mud with a dull thud. I turned in every direction, but no one was there. The gate behind me was closed. The chapel windows were dark. The voice had come from the hole I'd dug. I leaned forward, rain running down my face, and whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Only the sound of the rain. Then, faintly from deep within the earth, the voice spoke again. "You shouldn't have come." I stumbled back, nearly falling into the grave. My heart pounded, so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I grabbed the shovel, clutching it like a weapon. The voice was gone. Only the rain remained. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to leave, to never come back. But I couldn't. The priest had given me an order, and I had nothing left in this life but obedience. So I stood there, soaked and shaking, the storm raging around me, the grave yawning at my feet. I told myself it was only my imagination, that the wind and the rain had played tricks on my ears. But when I looked down again, I saw something impossible. The water at the bottom of the grave was rippling, not from the rain, but from underneath, as if something below had breathed. And with that breath came one final whisper, low and hollow, rising through the wet soil like steam. "Don't let him bury me." The words crawled through my spine and lodged in my chest. That was when I knew the storm wasn't the only thing that had come to São Lázaro that night. The rain hadn't stopped since I began digging. It fell in slow, heavy sheets, soaking through my coat and chilling me to the bone. The lantern beside me hissed each time a drop struck the flame. The smell of wet soil mixed with something sour, incense, maybe, or rot. I kept digging because I had to. Because Father Alvarez had said it was God's will. Because disobedience, in this village, was never just rebellion, it was sin. The hole was nearly deep enough when I heard it, the slow creak of wooden wheels grinding against mud. At first, I thought it was thunder rolling again, but then I saw it. A small cart approaching through the mist, its single lantern glowing like a dying eye. Two cloaked figures pushed it, their faces hidden, their boots sinking into the mud. Behind them walked Father Alvarez, his cassock plastered to his legs by the rain, his face untouched by the storm as if the water dared not stain him. The cart stopped beside the open grave. On it lay a man bound in chains. His wrists and ankles were tied so tight that the skin had turned blue. A dirty blindfold covered his eyes, and his mouth was gagged with a strip of cloth. His chest rose and fell too fast. I could hear the muffled sound of breath against the gag, short and trembling. "João," Alvarez said softly, his voice calm even in the wind. "Do not fear what you see. This man is not what he seems." "Who is he?" I asked, though I already knew. "Father Tomás," he said. "A servant of God who invited the unholy into his body. A vessel corrupted by the unnamed. His burial is not death. It is containment." Containment. The word crawled down my spine like a cold hand. He motioned to the cloaked men, and together they lifted Tomás from the cart. His feet dragged through the mud, his head rolling from side to side. I thought I heard him mumbling under the gag, but the wind drowned it out. They laid him beside the open grave. "Begin," Alvarez ordered. I hesitated. "You want me to bury him?" Alvarez interrupted, his eyes sharp. "Now." My hands trembled around the shovel. I looked down at Tomás. Even with the rain washing the dirt from his face, he looked human. Too human. His lips moved beneath the gag. I leaned closer, just for a second, and what I heard froze me. He was praying. Not in tongues. Not in some dark chant. He was saying the Lord's Prayer. Slowly. Weakly. As if he was clinging to it for life. "Father," I whispered, turning to Alvarez, "he's praying." "That is not him," Alvarez said sharply. "The thing inside him imitates holiness. It deceives." The two men lifted Tomás again and lowered him into the coffin that sat waiting. The sound of the chains clinking echoed through the graveyard. Alvarez handed me a hammer and nails. "Seal it," he said. Rainwater dripped from my chin as I stared down. Tomás's blindfold had slipped slightly. I could see one of his eyes, pale and terrified. He shook his head weakly, the chains rattling. "I can't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's alive." Alvarez's expression darkened. "You swore obedience to the church, João. You bury bodies without question. Do this, and your sins may finally be forgiven." Forgiveness. The word tore at me. I thought of my wife's lifeless face, of how I'd begged for a priest to save her, but none came. Maybe this was my penance, to serve the church even when my heart screamed no. I placed the lid over the coffin. The wood thudded against the sides. My hands shook as I pressed the first nail into place. The hammer felt heavier with each strike. Then I heard it. A muffled sound. Not a groan. Not a curse. A voice. "João." The hammer slipped from my hand and fell into the mud. The voice came again, clearer this time, though smothered by the coffin walls. "João, please don't." I stumbled back, staring at the sealed coffin. "How does he know my name?" I asked, my voice breaking. Alvarez didn't answer. He grabbed the hammer and thrust it back at me. "It's the demon. It knows your name. Finish it." But I couldn't move. The air around us had grown still, as if even the rain was holding its breath. "Please," the voice whispered again. "You're burying the wrong man." I looked at Alvarez. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't read, fear or fury, I couldn't tell. He raised the crucifix around his neck and began chanting in Latin, the words clashing with the distant thunder. My body moved on its own. I grabbed the shovel, tossed the first load of dirt into the grave, then another and another. The sound of soil striking wood was deafening. The voice beneath the ground grew softer, swallowed by the rain. When the last bit of earth covered the coffin, I dropped to my knees. My chest ached. The world felt wrong, heavier somehow. When I looked up, Father Alvarez was gone. The 2 cloaked men were gone too. Only the grave remained, and the whisper of rain. Then faintly beneath the soil, I thought I heard it again. Not words this time, just a sound. A sigh. A breath. And in that moment, I knew what I had done would never stay buried. I had never felt the cold of the earth like that before. Each shovelful I lifted seemed heavier than the last, as if the ground itself was resisting me. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the fog thickened, curling around my boots, pressing against my legs like hands that refused to let me leave. Father Alvarez stood nearby, lantern in hand, muttering prayers I no longer fully understood. His eyes shone with a kind of zeal that made my stomach twist. The coffin lay at the bottom of the pit, dark and silent. Father Tomas was inside, gagged and bound, his blindfold hiding the fear I could already feel radiating from him. I hated what I was about to do. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to leave this cursed place, but Alvarez's voice cut through the fog like a whip. Do it, Joao. Do not hesitate. The evil cannot be allowed to roam free. I swallowed, gripping the hammer tighter. My hands shook, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Slowly, I lifted the first nail. The wood resisted, splintering under the pressure. And then I heard it. A whisper. Faint, hoarse, impossibly close. Joao. I froze. My ears strained, but the voice came again, clearer this time, urgent, desperate. It came from the coffin itself. My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked at Alvarez, expecting him to scold me for listening, but his face was calm, almost expectant, as if he knew something I did not. Do not falter, he said softly, yet his tone carried an edge that made my blood run cold. I gritted my teeth and drove the nail in, but the voice would not stop. The words tumbled through the wooden walls, muffled but unmistakable. Joao, please stop, you're burying the wrong man. The sound tore at me. It was him, Father Tomas, but it was also not him. There was something else behind the voice, something deep and hollow that made the hairs on my neck rise. I dropped the hammer. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely touch the lid again. Alvarez stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. He is beyond help. The ritual is necessary. He is lost. No! I shouted, my voice breaking. He's alive. He's begging for mercy. Alvarez's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw not a priest, but something older, something cruel and patient hiding behind his face. Mercy, he hissed. Do you think mercy will save him now? The soul inside that body is not Tomas. It has been claimed by what lies beneath. The only mercy is the earth. I wanted to argue, to run, but the coffin was in front of me. The voice called again, pleading, commanding, and for the first time, I realized the words were not just for me. They were warnings, riddles of a truth I could not yet grasp. You cannot trust him. He carries the mark. The unnamed walks with him. The shivers that ran through my body were not from cold. My knees buckled, and I sank into the wet mud. I pressed my hands against the coffin lid, as if I could feel Tomas through the wood. The nails felt like iron spikes against my palms. And then, one word cut through everything, clear as a bell. Joao! I could not move. I could not breathe. The wind had died, the rain had stopped, and even the forest seemed to hold its breath. The coffin thudded once, twice, as though it were alive, and then silence. Alvarez stepped back, his hands raised. Finish it, he ordered, his voice sharp, cutting through the terror that gripped me. The world depends on it. I obeyed. Slowly, painfully, I hammered the last nail in. Each strike echoed like a death knell in the fog. I shoveled dirt over the coffin, layer by layer, until the earth swallowed him completely. I expected silence. I expected peace. But the voice did not stop. It was muffled now, a low hum vibrating through the soil beneath my knees. You've buried the wrong man. The words burrowed into my mind, haunting me. I looked up at Alvarez. His expression did not change. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the grave, the fog, and the sound of a voice that refused to die. I stumbled back to my home that night, drenched and shaking, but even in the warmth of my room, even under the covers, I could hear it whispering. Not pleading now. Not begging. Warning. Waiting. You've buried the wrong man. And I knew, deep in my chest, that this was only the beginning. I woke drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted around me like the soil I had shoveled just days before. The air in my small room was cold, though the fire had been burning all night. My heart still raced, and for a long moment, I could not remember why. Then it came back to me, the coffin. Father Tomas, buried alive beneath the damp earth of São Lázaro. I had heard his voice. I had seen his fear. And now, even in the safety of my room, I felt the grave calling me. That night, the dreams began. The first was subtle. I was walking through the cemetery, but the gravestones leaned inward as if watching. Mist crawled along the ground like crawling fingers. I could hear a faint murmur from somewhere deep beneath my feet. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the whisper grew louder, and then I heard it clearly. João! João! My name, carried through soil and shadow. I fell to my knees, trying to listen, my hands pressed to the frozen ground. The whisper was not angry, not pleading. It was patient, knowing. Father Tomas's voice, I realized, but not entirely. There was something else beneath it, something older, heavier, watching through him. I woke again, heart pounding, to find the same whisper echoing in my room. The walls were still, but the sound was there, moving in the corners, curling around the furniture. I wanted to pray, to make it stop, but my voice caught in my throat. Each word of the Lord's Prayer sounded weak, swallowed by the whisper that spoke back in Latin I did not understand. The next dream came hours later. I was digging again, in the same cemetery. The soil moved beneath my hands, not just soft earth, but something alive, something breathing. I struck the shovel down, but it struck back, knocking me to the ground. Then I saw them, pale hands pushing from the dirt, reaching for me. Not begging, not violent, just reaching, like the earth itself wanted me to notice, to remember. João, you buried the wrong man, the voice said. I screamed and woke once more, chest heaving, nails clawed into the mattress. The room smelled faintly of wet earth, incense, and something metallic I could not name. My head throbbed. My hands shook. I wanted to tell someone, but who could understand? Who could believe the dead speak through soil, calling your name in a voice that chills the blood, yet carries a strange sorrow? I did not sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the corner of my room, listening to the creak of the floorboards and the occasional gust of wind. I could almost swear I heard footsteps outside, but when I looked, the street was empty, fog rolling through like smoke. By dawn, I was exhausted, hollow-eyed. I knew I could not ignore it. The grave would not let me. The priest would not let me. And something told me that Alvarez was no longer the only danger waiting in São Lázaro. Whatever waited beneath the soil was patient. It was eternal, and it was beginning to trust me enough to speak. I stood, my hands still trembling, and whispered to myself, though I knew it would not help. I will not let you haunt me forever. I will find the truth. But deep in my chest, I knew the voice would follow me. In my dreams, in the wind, in the soil that clung to my shoes. It was only the beginning. The morning air was thick with fog, so dense it felt like walking through wet wool. Even before I reached the cemetery, I sensed something was wrong. The birds refused to stir, their silhouettes frozen on bare branches. The smell of damp earth was heavier than usual, almost sweet, like incense burned too long. When I approached Father Tomas's grave, my stomach twisted. The soil was rising, shifting as though it were breathing beneath my feet. At first, I thought it might be roots pushing up, but the earth moved too deliberately, too fluidly. I knelt down, pressed my palms to the ground, and the chill shot through my bones. The soil was cold, unnaturally so, and faint vibrations ran through my fingers, like a heartbeat buried deep below. I whispered his name. Nothing. I laughed at myself for being foolish. But then, faintly, almost inaudible, a voice slithered into my ears. Not a shout, not a scream, but soft, low, carrying a weight that made my hair stand on end. João. I jumped back, heart hammering. It was my name, not spoken aloud by anyone, but deep within the ground, beneath my hands. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. Perhaps the wind, or some echo of the village bells. Yet it was unmistakable. The sound was deliberate enough to pierce the fog and curl into my chest. I pressed my ear to the soil, trembling. Then the voice spoke again, clearer, closer. You must listen. He lied. He wears the mark. A chill swept up my spine. Father Alvarez. The name floated on my lips, unbidden. The thought struck me like a blow. Could Alvarez be hiding something? Could I have buried the wrong man? I staggered back, breath coming in shallow bursts, heart hammering like a drum. My fingers dug into the grass, nails scratching against stones that lined the grave. The whispers continued, faint, almost soothing in their cadence now, yet carrying an urgency I could not ignore. The rest of the cemetery was silent, but the air felt thick, alive. Shadows seemed to move at the edges of my vision, and the wind, or whatever it was, carried more than the scent of damp earth. It carried warning. I could hear it in the rustling of the leaves, the bending of the old iron gates, the very groan of the ancient stones beneath the fog. I wanted to run. I wanted to flee, to leave the cursed town behind. But something rooted me in place. A sense that the ground itself was demanding my attention, my presence. The voice spoke again, gently this time, guiding rather than warning. You are the one who must see. Do not turn away. The words echoed inside my skull, vibrating with authority and despair at the same time. My hands trembled, but I pressed them once more to the earth, listening. Each heartbeat of the soil, each faint whisper of Father Tomas beneath, drew me closer to a truth I had feared to face. I realized then that the world I thought I knew, the world of simple graves and holy rituals, was nothing but a thin veneer. Beneath the soil, beneath the church's orders, there was something older, deeper, and infinitely more dangerous than I could have imagined. And it was watching me, waiting for me to act. I did not know if I was ready, or if I would ever be. But the earth beneath Father Tomas's grave would not let me leave. I left the cemetery that morning with a weight pressing down on my chest, the whispers still clinging to my ears. I knew one thing for certain: the ground remembers, and it had chosen me to remember with it. The chapel was silent when I slipped inside, the heavy wooden door groaning like it wanted to warn me away. Candlelight flickered in the corners, throwing tall shadows against the cracked stone walls. Father Alvarez wasn't there yet, and I felt the familiar chill crawl up my spine. Something about this place had changed after Tomas was buried. It no longer smelled like old wood and incense alone. There was a sour, metallic tang that made my stomach twist. I moved toward the altar, careful not to disturb the thick layer of dust that had settled on the floor. That's when I noticed the fire. The smell of burning paper drifted toward me, harsh and bitter. I peered into the flames and saw the edges of parchment curling into ash. Someone had been destroying something important. My heart pounded as I realized what I had to do. I reached out and snatched a half-burned page from the fire. The ink was smudged, blackened, but some lines were still readable. Diagrams of circles, strange symbols, Latin phrases that twisted like the roots of a tree I couldn't name. My fingers trembled as I held it. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, like the ground over Tomas's grave had seeped into the chapel itself. I bent closer and read the words, trying to make sense of them. To bind the demon, the pure must be buried among the damned. My stomach turned cold. That's what Alvarez had made me do. I had buried Tomas alive. My hands had thrown the earth onto an innocent man. But then I saw it. Faint ink beneath the diagrams, written smaller, almost like a whisper. If the priest is innocent, the curse begins anew. My blood ran cold. Tomas wasn't the vessel. He wasn't the demon. He had been a man chosen for a lie, a tool to keep the true evil buried. I sank to the floor, clutching the ashes in my hands. The fire flickered violently, casting long, writhing shadows across the walls. I could almost hear Tomas's voice through the flames, whispering, "You know the truth beneath the altar." I shivered. That voice had been inside my dreams, under my skin, in my bones. It had been waiting for me to see this. A sudden creak made me snap my head up. Alvarez stood at the entrance, his eyes dark pools in the candlelight. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me. I could see the anger and fear tangled together in his face. He was burning something he didn't want anyone to find, but I had seen enough. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice low and sharp. "This isn't your business." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It is my business," I said. "I buried Tomas alive, and it was a lie. You lied to me. You lied to everyone." Alvarez stepped closer, the firelight reflecting off the silver cross he held. "The whispers you hear," he said, his voice trembling despite himself, "they are temptation. You must not listen." I shook my head, feeling more resolve than I had in weeks. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I hear the truth, and I know you are hiding it. The curse, it's not in him. It's here, in this place in you." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes flicked to the fire, and I saw the blackened burn marks on his hands. My stomach lurched. Those marks, the same as on the parchment. He wasn't just lying. He was part of it. Part of the evil Tomas had tried to stop. The flames crackled louder, and I felt the chapel grow smaller, the walls pressing in. My fingers still held the ashes, and I could almost feel them crawling through my veins, whispering secrets too terrible to speak. I had to do something. I had to uncover what was buried beneath the soil. Tomas's voice had chosen me, and now I had to act. I left the chapel that night with the charred fragments of truth in my coat pocket, my hands shaking. The wind outside rattled the doors, carrying whispers of prayers and curses alike. I knew the next step would be dangerous. I knew Alvarez would not allow it. But I could not ignore it any longer. Tomas had been silenced once. I could not let it happen again. And somewhere beneath the earth, I could feel the pulse of the grave waiting for me. I couldn't sleep. The whispers from the grave followed me like a shadow, soft and patient, crawling beneath the walls of my house. I knew I had to see the chapel again, to find answers before the voices drove me entirely mad. The night was heavy with fog, the air thick and cold, carrying the smell of wet earth and something I could not name. My footsteps were muffled by the moss-covered stones as I crept toward the chapel, the same place where I had first seen Alvarez burn the records. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and my lantern barely pierced the darkness. The pews were coated with dust, the air smelled of damp wood and burned candles. Shadows clung to every corner. Then I saw him. Alvarez stood near the altar, his back to me, his hands moving through the flames of the fireplace where old parchments burned. I froze, but the whispers in my mind pulled me closer. I stepped forward. "Alvarez," I called, my voice trembling. "I need to know the truth. What did you do to Tomas?" He didn't turn immediately. When he finally did, I saw it. His hands were blackened, burned, the skin cracked and oozing something dark. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear there, a flicker of doubt behind the cold mask he always wore. "You should not be here," he said, his voice sharp, brittle. "The things you hear, the whispers, they are not real. They are temptation, trying to lead you to sin." I swallowed, trying to steady my shaking hands. "The whispers are real. Tomas is speaking. The ground is alive. You buried him alive." Alvarez stepped closer, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across his face. He was not innocent. He sought knowledge forbidden to men. You do not understand what he found. You do not understand the consequences. I felt my stomach twist. Then why tell me lies? Why hide the truth? Alvarez's lips pressed into a thin line, and suddenly his calm mask cracked. His eyes darted toward the fireplace. He shoved the blackened parchments aside, scattering ashes across the stone floor. "I am bound by orders. I serve a duty higher than your comprehension. Do not look into the soil. Do not speak of the dead. You are not ready." The chapel grew colder. A wind rose from nowhere, extinguishing candles and sending a shiver down my spine. The shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally, coiling toward me like fingers. I stepped back, and that is when I noticed it, a faint, slow rumble coming from beneath the floorboards, vibrating through the soles of my feet. Alvarez's face turned pale, his own fear evident now. "Do not listen," he whispered, almost to himself. "Do not hear it." But I couldn't stop. The whispers, the calls of Tomas from the grave, they were louder now, almost screaming in my mind. The Latin prayers, the curses, all layered together into something I could barely comprehend. I wanted to flee, but my legs would not move. Something in the soil below demanded I stay. Alvarez's hands trembled as he raised his crucifix, but the blackened skin along his fingers glistened in the flickering shadows. He stared at me, then at the floor, muttering prayers with desperation I had never heard before. For the first time, I understood he was afraid. He was afraid of what we had buried, afraid of the truth Tomas carried, afraid of the ground beneath us. The wind moaned through the broken windows, and the floorboards cracked. Shadows shifted, stretching toward Alvarez as if reaching for him. He screamed, his voice echoing against the stone walls. I could see it then. He had been hiding, not from me, but from something that waited in silence, buried beneath centuries of dirt. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. "Alvarez," I said softly, "tell me the truth. Tell me what you buried. Tell me everything." He froze, eyes wide, staring at nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, he confessed. Tomas discovered things forbidden to the living. Secrets hidden by men who call themselves holy. They sent me to bury him because the world could not bear the truth. His voice broke. He fell to his knees, clutching the altar, trembling, unable to continue. I watched him, my chest tight with fear and anger. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand that he tell me everything. But the whispers were louder now, urging me, pulling me to the floorboards, to the grave, to the coffin I had buried. I knew then that the answers lay beneath the soil. Tomas was speaking. He was waiting. And Alvarez was not our enemy, not yet. Something moved beneath the chapel. I felt it in my bones, a slow, rising pulse that echoed the beat of my terrified heart. Shadows stretched and twisted around us both. I wanted to run, but I could not. The soil had begun to speak, and it would not be ignored. The moon hung low, a swollen red eye over the cemetery. I could feel its gaze on me, though I knew it wasn't watching. I carried my shovel like a weapon, each step through the wet grass sinking slightly, leaving footprints that would soon be swallowed by fog. My hands were trembling, but I forced them steady, gripping the cold metal as if it could anchor me to reality. I stopped at the edge of Tomas's grave. The earth was uneven, heaving like it had a pulse of its own. The fog swirled around me, curling at my ankles and creeping up my legs like icy fingers. The grave had bulged again since I last saw it. I dropped to my knees and pressed my palm against the soil. It was damp and warm beneath my fingers, and I could swear I felt a subtle vibration, like something breathing below. The voice came then, soft but undeniable, curling around my skull like smoke. It wasn't muffled this time. It was clear, deliberate. Joao, Joao. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. I had not spoken to anyone, not even breathed a word, yet the voice knew me. You were chosen to undo what he began. It was Father Tomas. Or it was him, though not the man I had buried. There was a weight to his words, like the soil itself had learned to speak. I felt the cold press of fear against my spine, but I could not step back. Not now. Not when I might undo the wrong I had been forced to commit. I lifted my shovel and struck the earth. The soil gave way easier than I expected, almost as if it wanted to be parted. Each strike sent a shiver up my arm, and each handful of dirt removed seemed to sigh beneath my hands. The voice spoke again, guiding me, whispering directions through the hum of wind and rustling leaves. Deeper, Joao, keep going. I dug with fevered hands, the fog wrapping tighter around me, seeping into my clothes, chilling my bones. Every layer I removed made the whispers sharper, closer, urgent. I could feel the coffin beneath me now, the edge scraping against my palms through the dirt. My stomach churned, and my breath came ragged. The moonlight caught on the nails I had hammered in weeks before, glinting like teeth. Suddenly, a shadow flickered at the edge of the grave. My muscles stiffened. Alvarez. He always appeared when I thought I was alone. His lantern swayed, throwing long, crooked shadows across the tombstones. You should not be here, he hissed, voice low and dangerous. The soil speaks lies. Leave it buried. I know what I buried, Alvarez, I shouted, though my voice shook. I know what you buried. I have to see for myself. He stepped closer, lantern casting his face in jagged light. The shadows of his eyes were hollow, but I could see the panic behind them. Panic and something worse, fear of what he could no longer control. The ground trembled beneath me, and dirt sprayed upward as if something beneath was pushing back. The coffin rattled faintly, the sound vibrating through my fingertips. I gripped the shovel tighter, unwilling to step away. The voice rose again, louder, insistent, more commanding than before. Do not fear, Joao. You will free me. I hesitated only a moment, then lifted the lid of the coffin. The soil gave way as though eager to release its secret. My breath caught, stomach twisting. The wood was old, worn, and the nails had rusted, making a sound like screaming metal as I pried it loose. A chill rose from the open coffin, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and bitter. I dared not look inside yet. My hands shook, but I forced myself down, closer, listening. Then I saw him, or rather, what he had become. The lid fell away fully, and inside lay Father Tomas, pale and silent, his body unnervingly still. But I could feel it, something inside him waiting. Something ancient, lurking beneath the skin. His eyes were closed, yet I felt them pierce through me, burning knowledge into my bones. He moved then, just a twitch, just enough to remind me he was not gone, not finished, not silent. And the whispers swelled into a chorus, surrounding me, vibrating in my skull. You were meant to come, the voice said, layered and unearthly. You are the one who can undo what was done. The air around me grew heavy, the fog thickening, as though the night itself leaned in to watch. My heart was hammering. My mind screamed to run, to flee into the darkness and never return. But I could not. I had come this far. I had to face it, whatever waited beneath the soil and inside Tomas. I took a shaky breath and reached in. I could feel the air thickening around me, like the forest itself was holding its breath. My hands were slick with mud, my knuckles white as I gripped the shovel, staring down at the disturbed soil of Father Tomas's grave. Every instinct in me screamed to stop, to run, but the voice I had heard every night for the past week tugged me forward. It was calm now, patient, coaxing me toward the truth. Then a light flared behind me. Alvarez's lantern cast long, jagged shadows across the ground, and I froze. He stood at the edge of the grave, tall and rigid, eyes glinting with a strange fire. His voice broke the silence like a whip. "Stop this at once. You do not know what you meddle with." I turned to face him fully, my voice trembling though I tried to hide it. "I know enough. Tomas wasn't possessed. You buried him alive because of lies." Alvarez's lips curled, but there was no warmth in his smile. Only fury. Lies? Lies are what the weak hear to justify their cowardice. The demon takes root in men like you. You think you understand what the church must do. You think you are meant to play God. His hands shook as he lifted the crucifix. The candlelight glinted off the silver, but something was wrong. The metal seemed to ripple as if alive, and when he raised it higher, a black, sticky substance oozed from the edges. My stomach churned. "Alvarez, what is that?" He spat on the ground. "The proof you are too blind to see. Tomas discovered secrets that were never meant for men. He found the truth of what lies beneath our church, beneath your faith. And for that, he had to be silenced." I swallowed hard. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "Silenced by you. By your hands. You killed him. He was innocent." Alvarez stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the moonlight. "Innocent? Do you hear him now, whispering from the grave? That voice is the unnamed. That voice is corruption. You have been hearing lies in your sleep because you are weak. The demon tests you." I shook my head, my voice rising. "No. That voice is Tomas. He's warning me. He's telling me the truth. You are the danger." Alvarez's face twisted. Rage and fear mingled in a way I had never seen before. "You dare accuse me? You dare question the priest of São Lázaro?" The ground trembled beneath our feet, faint at first, then violently. The soil over the coffin quivered as if something beneath it was alive. I could hear Tomas's voice now, clearer than ever. "He lies. He wears the mark." Alvarez's eyes widened, his hands clawing at the crucifix as if it could shield him from what was coming. He screamed scripture, every word broken, harsh, desperate. But the crucifix warped in his fingers, bending, melting into black sludge, and I could see the panic in his eyes. He was no longer the authority I had feared. He was a man, terrified, exposed. "Do you hear it now?" I yelled, stepping forward. "Tomas is innocent. You've done nothing but bury lies and sin." He lunged at me, shrieking, but the earth beneath him buckled, throwing him back. I grabbed the shovel, bracing myself, but it was useless. The soil roared, alive with something older than faith, older than fear. The voice of Tomas, layered with something darker, whispered my name, guiding me. I knew I had to act. Alvarez screamed my name, a final plea for authority, for mercy, for God. But the ground shook, and the whisper from beneath drowned him out. I realized then that the grave was not just Tomas's prison. It was a warning, and I was the one who had to listen. The night air was thick with something unholy, and I stood at the edge of the grave, knowing that whatever came next would change everything, and there was no turning back. The storm hit like a drumbeat of doom. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines, and thunder followed, shaking the ground beneath my feet. I stood over the grave, my hands trembling on the handle of the shovel. The soil was wet, cold, and almost alive, pushing back against me with every strike. The whispers I had ignored for nights were now louder, insistent, urgent. I could hear him. Father Tomas. Or something speaking through him. The voice was layered, part pleading, part warning, part rage. It carried through the dirt like a living thing, curling around my mind and squeezing. I felt the earth beneath me pulse with each word. "Joao, you were meant to undo what they began." I swung the shovel one last time and cracked the coffin lid. The sound was deafening in the storm, like a scream that belonged to the world itself. Dirt exploded outward, falling in heavy clumps. And then I saw him. Tomas lay there, skin pale as marble, eyes wide open but unblinking. His chest did not rise or fall, yet the voice came from him. A chorus, a mix of human sorrow and something ancient, something old before the church had any power. It hissed and whispered all at once, reciting prayers and curses, names I did not know but somehow felt I had always feared. Alvarez appeared beside me, his face a mask of fury and terror, the lantern shaking in his hand. "Stop this! Stop it now!" he yelled, raising his crucifix. His voice cracked, uneven, laced with desperation. "I command you in the name of God." The crucifix melted in his hand. The silver ran down like molten metal, hissing as it hit the wet soil. I stepped back, my heart hammering, as Tomas's voice rang through the night, stronger, clearer, undeniable. It was no longer only Tomas. Something had merged with him, a presence that was patient, ancient, and cruel. It spoke directly to Alvarez. Alvarez, it hissed, his full name ringing through the storm. You buried the innocent. You hid the truth. You have lived in lies for decades. Alvarez screamed, clutching at his chest, falling to his knees in the mud. His eyes bulged, and I swear I could see the guilt and fear pouring from him like smoke. No, I did what was necessary. I followed the orders, he stammered, gasping, as black streaks of blood ran from his mouth and nose. The voice did not relent. It recited every secret, every lie, every act of cruelty he had ever committed, and the storm seemed to answer with a deafening roar. I wanted to run. My legs felt like stone. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Tomas, or what had become of him, turned toward me. His eyes were hollow yet knowing. The voice softened, almost gentle. João, you were never meant to bury me. You were meant to remember. And then the body moved, slowly dissolving into dust. It scattered across the wet earth, leaving behind something small, dark, and humming, a black rosary etched with runes I could not read. The whispers faded, but did not stop entirely. They lingered in my ears, in the soil, in the air itself. Alvarez lay collapsed, lifeless, his final scream swallowed by the storm. I sank to my knees, the rain soaking me through. I held the black rosary in my hand, feeling its warmth pulse against my palm. The voice was gone, but I knew it had not left. Something ancient still slumbered beneath the soil, and the echoes of that night would follow me forever. The storm had finally passed, leaving a thick silence that pressed against my ears. The cemetery was still, but the air carried the scent of wet earth and burnt incense. I stepped cautiously among the gravestones, the black soil soft beneath my boots. The coffin was gone. Father Tomas was gone. Only the disturbed earth remained, the grass matted with mud and rainwater. I could not breathe properly, though I tried. My chest felt heavy, like the sky itself was pressing down on me. The black rosary burned lightly in my pocket, a strange warmth that both comforted and terrified me. I pulled it out and held it in my palm. The beads were rough, carved with symbols I did not understand, yet somehow they seemed alive. A faint hum rose from them, low and vibrating, and I could swear I heard a whisper. Not Tomas, not Alvarez, but something else, something old. I clenched my fist around the rosary, forcing myself to focus. I walked toward the chapel, the same chapel where Alvarez had met his end. Its doors hung crooked, blackened at the edges. I pushed one open and entered. The interior smelled of wet wood and ash. The altar was splintered, the crucifix melted into a black puddle. I knelt on the cold stone floor and pressed the rosary to my lips. You were never meant to bury me, the voice had said. You were meant to remember. I could still hear it, faint but clear, echoing through my mind. The words sank into me slowly. I had obeyed. I had sinned. I had failed. But now I understood. Tomas had not been a vessel for evil. He had been a warning. The truth was buried in silence, hidden under the weight of fear and authority. I rose, trembling, and walked outside. The first light of dawn spilled across the village. São Lázaro looked ordinary again, the fog thinning to reveal the crooked streets and moss-covered roofs. Yet I knew it was a lie. Nothing was ordinary. The soil remembers. And so must I. I looked back at the cemetery one last time. The grave was empty, the earth smooth. Alvarez lay where he had fallen, his face twisted in terror, half-burned papers scattered around him. No one else would see what had happened here. No one would believe. I turned away, walking down the path that led out of the village. The black rosary pressed against my chest, warm and humming. I could feel it like a pulse, alive beneath my fingers. I knew the voice would return. It always would. I did not resist. I only whispered, low and trembling, into the empty morning air. I will remember. And as I walked, the wind carried it again, faint beneath the trees, beneath the earth. The soil remembers, João. And so must you.